Launch is 21.3 degrees. Ready.
Pretty good. 21.3 degrees is a little bit higher than optimum. I like to be around 20 to 20.5 degrees launch angle with the 9-iron, but 21.3 is not too far off that at all. And with a spin rate right around 9,000, I know that my angle of attack was pretty good. So the Flight Scope Mevo is what I'm using here, and it doesn't have the metrics like dynamic loft or angle of attack, but based on my spin rate and my launch angle, I have a pretty good idea of what my angle of attack will be. Now, dynamic loft is the loft of the club face at impact relative to the horizon. So if my 9-iron is 41 degrees, I'd like my dynamic loft to be about 37, 38 degrees at impact. So the static loft of the club is the loft of the club. Dynamic loft is at impact, and we know that, or we should know that, hands ahead of the ball at impact is a good position to be. They progressively get further ahead with more loft. So in the past, I would tend to flip. So meaning rather than holding this left wrist flexion, turning my body out of the way, getting my wrist to hold its position, I would, as many amateur golfers do, is flip the club at impact. If I flip and get the shaft vertical, I'm adding loft. If I can hold this position and flight the ball down with the right amount of angle of attack, so around -4 degrees angle of attack, will produce that 9,000 RPMs, nice spin into the green. So even though some of these smaller launch monitors don't have all those metrics, if you learn what each of them means, then you can determine some of those other metrics like I was talking about. So 21.3 degrees, pretty low. Now I can hit low shots, and I always could, even when I was a flipper, I could manipulate the trajectory by simply putting it back in my stance and pushing my hands forward, coming down on it steep and finishing low. I could really drop that angle of attack, or I'm sorry, that launch angle.
Launch is 15.5 degrees.
15.5 degrees, pretty good. Also with these monitors, the pocket-sized ones, they're two-dimensional, so I don't know how much that spun to the right or if I hooked it or what. You have a tendency to push or fade a ball that's played back in your stance because you haven't completed the arc of the swing, so the club face could be slightly open, or you could overcompensate and set up with the club face slightly closed. And then I started to hook punch shots like that. So it's best to learn how to flight the ball down with the ball in the same position. So if I'm flipping, I'm adding loft, say my dynamic loft of a 9-iron ends up being 42 or 43, then it's too high, I'm losing distance. So over the years, what I do to combat that is to come down with this really steep angle of attack. So if I have a 43-degree dynamic loft, but I'm coming down -10 degrees, then I'm bringing that launch angle down. But I'm not hitting it with the optimum amount of spin because I'm coming down so steep. So these pro golfers are really coming through with a shallower angle of attack, taking shallower divots than the ones that I had been taking in the past. And sometimes still when I play now, I'll take a huge divot. I tend to be quite a digger. So I'm trying to shallow that angle of attack out and get my hands out in front of the ball, de-lofting the club at impact to create a lower trajectory without moving the ball back in my stance. So let me see if I can do that. Bring it down to maybe something like 17 or 18 degrees.
Launch is 17.8 degrees.
Perfect.
Ready.
So these can be good tools for doing those sorts of things, to feel like you're coming through with the hands ahead of the ball at impact. Again, I can't see if it went left or right, but due to my smash factor, which is another metric, 1.3, that's almost center of the club face as you can get. So I have a feeling that it didn't deviate from the center line too much. It was pretty good, pretty on target, and it was a nice strike, lower trajectory, and still around that 150 yard mark, which is about my max 9-iron distance. So get yourself one of these and play around with it. The Mevo Plus has just come out as well, and they're about 4 times the cost, but also have about 4 times the metrics. So you can really get into those numbers of your golf swing, and it's not just fluff. You can really use it to change the performance of your swing. So try it out.